What is the best and easiest way to enhance your stories? We're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to tell you it is adding details, adding real life details. So I'm going to talk about why and how you can do that to make your stories sparkle.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Amante channel. If we are just meeting, I am Julia Amante. I am a women's fiction author and also here to share some writing tips of things that I have learned along the way that hopefully will help you. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about is how to bring real life into our stories. And how those details can help you to really make your story stand out. Okay, so first let's talk about the basic details, right? So we're going to have just basic details. We're going to have the character hold a glass or drink a coffee cup. Those are sort of kind of our basic real life moving through the story. A police officer is going to have a gun. A teacher might have a backpack, a note, a briefcase. I don't know. A lawyer might have a briefcase. So they're going to have their normal sort of props. So that's really not what I'm talking about. That is something that most writers do add to their story because they understand that we have to have details. I'm going to talk about just other types of real things that happen in real life that you can blend into your book. Now, the reason that details are important and the reason that you want to have those kind of things in there is because you want to situate your reader. You want your reader to feel that this is a real world, right? It's a real thing that is happening. Yes, it's just your fictional story, it's just your fictional world, but we don't want the reader to think about that. We don't even, they know they're reading fiction, but we don't want them, when they open up that book, they're in this world that you've created for them. So we don't want them to be reminded that they're reading a story. And the more generic you are, the more the reader's going to think, yeah, I'm reading a story, rather than you're being very specific about things. So you do want to have very specific details. Another type of detail that writers are pretty good at adding is location and time. So you do want to have that, obviously, right? So if your story takes place in Los Angeles, then you want to give us some hints that you are in Los Angeles. Also, is it Los Angeles 2022? Is it Los Angeles, 1822? Is it in the future? Is it like 2522, right? So you want to let us know immediately where we are, what the time period is, and that way again it helps to situate the reader. So that kind of detail, I think writers also are pretty good at adding. They know, you kind of know instinctively that we need to tell the reader where we're at, where the story is taking place. So let's talk about those other real life details that I want you to think about adding and why I think that is important for you. Okay, this is not an exhaustive list, but it's just some examples. Okay, so one of the things that you can add, details that you can add, can be things like historical figures, right? We can add Thomas Jefferson if we're talking about that time period in U.S. history. Why? Because it gives us, first of all, again, it helps to situate us in the time, but then also just adds a certain flavor, right? And it doesn't have to be historical. It can be current time. That will date your book though, right? So you have to be a little careful of that. So if I writing about 2020 and some of the, let's say, political things that were happening, and I'm talking about and I'm bringing those characters in, either somebody mentioning them or actually walking into your story, it is going to date your book to that time period. But if you're okay with that, then bring those people in. So that's one type of real life that you can add. You can add real people. You can add Steve Jobs. You can add these people to your story, and again, just mentioning them. They don't have to be main characters. They don't even have to be supporting characters in your story, but sometimes just mentioning these historical figures helps the reader to make it feel like it's really happening. So the next thing can be like historical dates, right? So I can say November 22nd, 1963. What, but people still might not know that, right? If you're throwing dates that people don't know about, you want to explain it. So, what that would be the Kennedy assassination. So if I mention that, then people will, again, will know the time period, they'll know what's happening. So those sometimes dates help. 9/11, again, it's recent enough that everybody knows what I'm talking about if I say that. Other things can be like certain holidays. You can talk about things that happen. I can talk about the Rose Parade that happens in Pasadena on New Year's Day. I can talk about, other things that happen around holidays that makes people feel like they're there, that things are happening, like maybe they're just driving through traffic, they're trying to get to their mother-in-law's house who lives close to Pasadena, and it's like, oh, whoops, I forgot that today there's going to be a parade going through here, just like it is every year, and I forgot about it, right? So there can be little mentions of things like that that, again, bring in real life and make us feel like we are there with the character and we are in this world. You can also use things like iconic places, a Statue of Liberty, something that somebody would recognize, Eiffel Tower, all of that people have seen a million times on TV. And these iconic places help, again, the reader to feel like they know where you're at and can relate to the place. Okay, world events, anything that's happening in the world, World War II, right? Anything that's, any kind of world event you can add in there again as another real life place, a real life thing. Other things that you can use are items, right? If you can talk about your iPhone, you can even talk about brands, because brands have, you can say Apple because it has, it has that that it's a relevant item, and that's really what I'm talking about, right? Is you want to bring in these relevant details that people can connect with. And why do we want to do that? Well, because these items, these things that we are mentioning, are references that people can relate to. Okay, and the whole point that we're mentioning it is to evoke a feeling, right? So if I want my character to, is a businessman and I want him to seem super professional, I'm going to evoke certain brands. I'm going to have him have his iPhone and his certain type of briefcase, and he's going to drive a certain brand of car. Why? Because I'm trying to create this image of this business person. So all these references to these real life things are helping me to tell the reader what kind of person this is. It's a way of me describing, right, who he is and what he values and what he's into. Okay, and there are some limitations to referencing things. Okay, so what are they? Well, one of the things is, you notice that most of the things that I mentioned are from my American perspective. So all of the places and the dates and the historical figures and all the things are from, again, my American perspective. So they're all American things, right? So maybe a reader from a different country, if the reference is not well known, will not know what I'm talking about, and will not understand will not have the same emotional reaction to what I'm saying. So for example, let me share this. So let's say that there's a couple of characters that are trying to get into this really cool club in Hollywood. And they can't get in. And then maybe one of them will say, geez, getting into this club is harder than getting a seat at the Rose Bowl parade on New Year's Day. Well, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything if the reader doesn't know how difficult it is to get a seat at the Rose Bowl parade, right? So if they have tried to and they know how hard it is to get to be there, or if they have at least seen it on TV and they've seen the crowds and that's like, oh yeah, it must be really hard. Just like, New Year's, New Year's Eve, right, in New York. how crowded and how difficult it would probably be to find a hotel room, let's say on New Year's Eve in New York. So if people are familiar with your reference, then it works really well because you've created that image in their mind without having to say that, right? Um, and that always is really good, and it's one of the reasons we want to use references. So, but you have to be careful that people actually understand the reference and they know it, right? They are familiar with it, and then that way they can feel the emotion that you want them to feel. So some examples of references that you do have to be careful with, so real life details that you might want to watch out for is things like movies, books, TV shows. Because again, not everybody reads the same book, not everybody watches the same TV show. So if you're referencing somebody that somebody may not know, then that could cause some confusion, or it would just go over their head and they wouldn't know what you're talking about. You wouldn't have that effect that you want to have. So I could say Superman. Everybody's going to know who Superman is. I don't really need to worry about them not knowing. But if I said, for example, John Cage and Ally McBeal, do you remember Ally McBeal? It was in the 1990s. Did you ever watch it? Do you know that this guy was sort of this very quirky lawyer? If I'm trying to compare, let's say, a character to that quirky lawyer that John Cage plays on Ally McBeal, if you watch the show, you're like, oh, okay, I get. He's a very strange, very intelligent, but very odd person. If you saw it, you would get it. But if you didn't, I'm going to lose the majority of my readers who are going to go like, who? Right? And that's not a reaction that you want. So you might want to be very careful. And I'm going to talk about when it actually can work, but you want to be careful with those type of things. Another type of reference or detail that you might want to avoid is music, because a lot of times music does create emotion, and if we use if we use the right one and people have heard it, it's like, oh yeah, that somebody's at a funeral, let's say, and they play a certain song, and it's like, oh God, yeah, I could see how this would break somebody up. But what if they haven't heard it? They won't get that feeling. So I remember when my son, I think was in middle school, he shared this song with me. It was called Hero of War. And I don't know if you've heard it. It's about this military guy who goes to war, and he's going as this hero. Like everybody thinks he's a hero, right? He's going to fight for the United States, and he thinks he is. He's going to do a good thing. But then as he's there, and he has to shoot people that are civilians, right? Children, and he realizes he's really not a hero, but he comes back, and everybody thinks he's a hero, and he knows deep inside, no, there is no hero of war, really. There are no heroes in war. So if I wanted to reference this, right, that this guy is broken up, and I could use that song because it's such a great song, but what happens? Even though it was really popular at that time, so many people might not know it. So kind of the same thing, right? Same thing as a movie. So all those things where people might not be able to relate, think about whether do you really want to use it. If it might cause more of a problem than help you as the writer. So there's two things to consider here. When would I use these? I might want to reference a certain movie or a song. When would I do that? Well, there's two things. So one is if my book is not going to be around a long time, because again, it will date your story. So if my book is, let's say, I'm a romance writer. If my book is a category romance, well, if you're familiar with those type of books, they come, they'll come out the month that they come out. They're on the shelf for that month, then they're gone. I mean, they're always available on Amazon and online and stuff, but they're only on the shelf. They have a very short shelf life, because the next month a whole new group of category romances will come out, and then the next, every month you get a whole new group. So it doesn't have a very long shelf life. It is available online for a long time, forever maybe, but if it's going to be something where it's okay, like I really want it to be popular for now, I really want to evoke all these modern day things, and I'll go ahead and make those references to music or books or whatever, because again, it's not something I need to worry about people. And usually, if the second reason is if you have a group of readers that know you very well, like they've read your work, you might reference other characters from your books, or a lot of fantasy writers are going to be very familiar. Like there was a I think book and I think show. I'm not positive because I'm not into all the manga and anime and all that. But I know because of my daughter and my niece, they liked the Naruto series. Okay, now I never watched one episode or read a book, so I don't know anything about it at all. But I do know that uh, that the kids, that the readers of these type of stories know, like they know all the references. So if your group, if your readership is narrow enough that they're going to be familiar with any of these references that you're making, then you're good, right? You can write those things. So if it's either not going to be around a long time and I want to add certain books and music and ever that I know my readers are going to understand, I can do that. Or if I have this very particular genre and group that I know my readership is going to understand any reference that I make to another, like anime type stuff, then I can add that in there. The other thing is that you might want to add that stuff in there anyways, even if only a few people. So let's say you have a very loyal following, and you know that if you reference something, they're going to understand it. Maybe the majority of the people are not. Sort of like these Easter egg things, right? People love to be in the know, to know something that somebody else doesn't know. And so even though if it doesn't impact the story or the understanding of the story, but you add something in there that you like, oh, my loyal readers will know exactly what I'm talking about, and this is sort of a gift to them, then you can add that. It's kind of fun. I wouldn't add a lot of those, but every once in a while, if you reference something that you know your readership will understand, it will give them this sort of thrill. And the people who don't understand it will just go like, okay, whatever, that song, means nothing to them, and they'll just keep reading. And maybe if they're curious enough, they might go and look up that song and listen to it. But those are the times when you can use these very, very specific details that are not going to be the most popular. The first ones I mentioned, those are sort of the most people will know. Most people will know what the Statue of Liberty is, right? If you mention that, you don't have to explain it. You can just add it in there. They'll know where you're at. They'll know what it looks like. They'll know everything about it, right? But these other very specific details are the ones that you have to watch and be a little careful with. Okay, I hope that this has helped you think about adding details, think about bringing the real world into your story. Again, the reason we do it is to situate the reader, and because it helps to create an emotion in the reader by referencing certain things. Okay, hopefully that helps, and that you will add more details. Think about adding more details to your stories. Oh, I almost made it through a whole video without my dog barking. Hopefully this has helped you, and that you will return again next week for my next writing tip. Now I'm going to let my dog, I think somebody's at my door. I'm going to let them go. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you again next week.